Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Game of Thrones podcast. I'm your host, Carmine of Red Team Review, and I'm joined here once again by Preston Ulysses Jacobs. That's right, I'm changing your middle name every time.
Fire and blood, fire and blood. We need like a fire and blood theme song
We
that
do?
comes in. Yeah.
No, we don't.
Fire and blood. Okay.
Guys, welcome back to the Game of Thrones podcast. We're still covering Fire and Blood, apparently, and this time we'll be covering chapter. I believe it's 10. Yes, chapter 10. Jaehaerys and Alysanne, Their Triumphs and Tragedies. As always, we're available on SoundCloud and iTunes, so consider checking us out on those platforms. And if you do, please leave us a review on iTunes. It would help out a lot. And as always, leave your comments and questions down below, and we'll cover them next time. So, Preston, we're back for Fire and Blood once again. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Into the thick of things. What did you think of Jaehaerys and Alysanne, Their Triumphs and Tragedies?
This chapter was long, but I actually did not mind that. In fact, I was so enamored with one of a certain, because you know how this kind of feels like a Song of Ice and Fire in the sense where there's like multiple narratives here, and there. You
Mm,
have Rhaenyra or Elissa Farman, the
yeah.
little creepy mystery of what happened to Aerea, and things
Yeah.
going on in the north with Alysanne's little journey up there. So I did like all of that, and
Multiple locations, multiple point of
mhm.
views. Yes. Mm-hmm.
There was one part of the story here that I liked so much that I actually went into the next chapter and I just couldn't stop. I had to continue reading, which was Alyssa's journey. Not Alyssa,
Mm.
Alicia?
Alison?
No.
Oh,
Alicia
Elisa.
Farman, yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, you want to start?
Sure, sure.
So the chapter starts out with the Maesters praising Jaehaerys' reign as prosperous and peaceful because under his tenure, Westeros flourished immensely, and for a large part of its history, after the First Men and Andal expansions, the continent was always in a constant state of war between all the different kingdoms, and not much progress was achieved, but united under one benevolent ruler, everybody wins. Fewer people marching off to war means everyone has more time to farm and fish, trade increases, and all the major cities from Duskendale to White Harbors is flourishing, but even more so did
Um,
King's Landing.
so there's a couple things that I think are pretty interesting that I put in my notes. Is that one, we have to remember that Septon Barth is now a major source for our Maester. So like, the point of view and tone of everything might change because we're talking about things being Septon Barth, who this guy wrote the book on dragons. Um, if there is a dragon conspiracy, he's definitely at the heart of things. So uh, we'll see about that. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that we're talking about the population of Westeros skyrocketing, and so one of the big mysteries is like what's keeping Westeros technologically stagnant, and why isn't the population um, like that much larger? I remember a lot of people asking, like, wait, if House Stark is 8,000 years old, why are there only like 10 Starks in the story? Like, why aren't there thousands of Starks? Um, and I guess the answer is that war is constantly going on. But so in a sense, the unification of Westeros and the arrival of dragons and everything that comes with it has pushed off the balance of the world. Like now we have population growth, and they're talking about all the development. Well, with development comes environmental destruction. So I do wonder about this. That for thousands and thousands of years you have a fairly stable, stagnant Westeros population, stagnant technologically, stagnant population, and now dragons have arrived and things are taking off. Hmm. Anyway, continue.
Well, I would assume the reason we don't have thousands of Starks running around is for the same reasons why, certain people in certain classes have more kids than, others. Peasants, it's kind of a necessity to have a lot of kids, whereas nobles and royals, it's more strategic. And not to mention, if you have a lot of Starks running around, your enemies could use that against you in some weird way. We're kind of seeing that
Yeah,
now in
yeah.
the books, and we saw it a bit in the show. I mean, Roose Bolton at one point in the show says, "It's not her virtue I need, it's her name." So It's a bit strategic not to have too many kids, but for alliance purposes, and you need an heir and maybe a backup heir every now and then.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, well, this is the whole thing with the whole problem with feudalism. You're gonna if you have a bunch of kids and the eldest gets the land, what do you do with the other kids?
right.
And even if you find a place for those kids, what do you do with their kids? And then it just goes on and on forever.
This is actually why I want you to play Crusader Kings 2, the Game of Thrones mod for it, because that's the problem I have all the goddamn time when I play it. Because you can actually play as one of the lords from Westeros in Crusader Kings, and then I'll have like a bunch of kids, and I'm like, ah, fuck, who wants to marry my kid? Whose alliance do I need? And that's just like in the series. So,
Now you see why feudalism, you know, doesn't work.
but then if you put democracy in charge, then your council installs a dumbass, and then everything goes downhill. So no. The,
Yeah, well, are you talking about modern politics today? Yes. Democracy just has fallen apart.
But when we last left off on the previous chapter, Rhaena, her
Mhm.
daughter, ran off with Balerion, Black Dread, one of the
Yes.
largest dragons ever. And she spends a good chunk of the time of the chapter going from almost every major location in Westeros to look for her daughter, and eventually, for most of the year, she disappears. There are
Now,
reports. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I think this is really funny because the report is that she's taking her dragon around and searching for her daughter, and she keeps going back to like the places of her former allies.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, is she looking for her daughter, or is she trying to form alliances again and start a war? Because I mean, if you think about it this way, like her daughter has control of Balerion, and she has control of Dreamfyre, and no one is currently riding Vagar. So the three biggest dragons, the three oldest dragons, are in control of Dreamfyre Rhaena. So like, if her daughter ever returned, man, they could totally take over, because Balerion and Dreamfyre are bigger than Silverwing and whoever Alysanne's dragon was, escapes me for the moment. But you know, um, so it's just she could definitely be searching, going to these different places, trying to get them together for war and then failing.
For
'Cause it
nostalgia
doesn't,
purposes, I mean, she had a lot of
yes,
happy
but
memories in some of these places.
it seems just so obvious that she flew off to Essos. So why would Rhaena be flying around to Fair Isle to look for her daughter? It just Why would she go to Old Town to look for her daughter? Yeah, you know what? If Balerion the Black Dread was flying around, I think some ravens would let you know. You don't need to fly
Well,
around the country searching.
she went to Old Town because I think Raina's thought process there was maybe she went to go see her sister.
But clearly, if Balerion the Black Dread flies into Old Town, people would have seen him.
That is true. He is incredibly large, and they would see him coming from a mile away.
So I think she was she's still thinking about taking over. But, me always looking for the conspiracy.
Well, Gildane leaves us to wonder, like, if she was really searching for her daughter, or if she just wanted some solitude, or both. Because for a good chunk of the year, she does disappear. No one sees her
Right.
anywhere.
And I would say none of the above. She's trying to make connections, but
Eventually, like, news of her going all over the place, it reaches Jaehaerys, and Jaehaerys really blames himself for not embracing Aerea and forming a bond with her. But he's mostly concerned with the fact that an incredibly large dragon was out there somewhere in the world in the hands of a 13-year-old girl. It's
oh
also
yeah.
it's
I mean,
also
a 13-year-old girl that can take over the world. I mean, obviously we're supposed to make our Daenerys parallels,
hmm,
but like Daenerys being a young girl with all of the dragons. But like, yeah, I mean, if a 13-year-old girl ran off with a nuclear warhead, like, wouldn't you be worried?
yes, I would.
I mean, she has the power by herself to conquer the world. I mean, Balerion the Black Dread could probably take on all the dragons. I mean,
See, I
maybe.
think I think it's not as simple as that, and they even pointed out because dragons aren't as easy to tame as horses. Considering if you're not
Hmm,
careful, you could fall to your death, and once free of you, they find a cave or a mountain and make it its lair. Because
sure.
they even say it in the chapter, dragons are vagabonds by nature. And for those of you who English isn't your native language, vagabond is definition, a person who wanders from place to place without home or a job. So, in this case, dragons will do that. But I don't think Aerea, and they even mention it as well in the chapter, Aerea has a bond with it. She never formed one, and that does come into
Right,
play
but
later.
we're definitely also supposed to think about dragons forming a lair and being, and all of that. We're supposed to think about Daenerys' escape from Meereen, and you know, Drogon like finding a lair and doing that, and then her training to be a better dragon rider during that time period.
Hmm.
And so we're supposed to be thinking, if we're making the Daenerys parallel, that Aerea is learning how to ride that dragon. And if she learns how to ride that dragon well, she can come back and conquer the kingdom. The kingdom is hers, you know. So I think that's what's on Jaehaerys's mind, is that this girl could come back and conquer Westeros by herself. Her dragon, no, like I said, no one's riding Vhagar at this point. So the second biggest dragon is out of the picture. Um, and so after that, I mean, Jaehaerys's dragon isn't very big. He's like I'm thinking like 1/20th the size of Balerion the Black Dread, if not smaller.
Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, Balerion the Black Dread is insanely large compared to the other dragons. I mean,
Well,
Vhagar might be getting up there, but like, yeah, we're talking like completely different sizes. Yeah,
a lot of the people say that's one of the reasons Maegor was able to take down Aegon 1.5, you called him?
yeah, yeah.
Because the
Aegon the
Balerion was
Uncrowned,
so
yeah.
big, and I guess Aegon 1.5 thought he could use the smaller dragon's speed to his advantage, but no.
No, no, no.
So,
No, I mean, there's a reason why Maegor the Cruel like held out for Balerion, and it was a smart move for him. So yeah,
but they come to the conclusion that if no lord in Westeros has seen a giant black lizard, then she has to be in Essos. So Jaehaerys has his Pantoshi master coin, Rigo Draz, uses contacts in Essos to look for her instead of the stolen dragon eggs, which they were still looking for until this took precedent. And
yeah.
Jaehaerys sends William the Wasp to lead the search for her. Now, unfortunately, the tales of potential monster sightings in Pentos was a setup for bandits, and Sir William the Kingsguard and his men were killed. This position in the Kingsguard was eventually filled by Lucamore Strong. By the way, am I saying that right? Is it Lucamore or Lucamore?
Yeah, I mean, however you want.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying Lucamore.
But Lucamore is a person we'll get to more on later. If you've read Feast for Crows and you remember the Aris Oakheart chapter, then you're probably familiar
Yeah.
with this character. But afterwards, we had more rumors and reports, from Essos. There were, reportings of a dragons in the fighting pits of Astapor that was being used as entertainment, but it just turned out to be a wyvern, which.
Right, which is funny because there's actually like tiny dragon-like animals that exist in the world
Mm-hmm.
that aren't dragons, but are pretty close to dragons. So yeah, that's kind of funny, like dragons just didn't come from nowhere. There were these other dragon-like creatures already existing
In
it's
Southaros.
kind of, yeah, like what it's hard to say what they actually look like. I mean, pterodactyls, like small dragons,
Mm-hmm.
but I have this idea that dragons were genetically engineered in order to be bonded with uh with Targaryens, and so or Valyrians, and so they might have started with some wyverns, and
Is it wyverns or wyverns?
I don't know.
Either
It doesn't
or.
matter. Yeah,
Hmm.
I have no clue. I'm horrible. I'm horrible with these pronunciations.
We're actually going
It's
to
like
get to that in a minute with the Valyrians and their experiments. So
yeah,
they keep getting reports that we may have seen something big with wings, maybe all over Essos. Nothing truly important until one day. Balerion the Black Dread shows up out of the blue in King's Landing with Aerea clinging to him, barely alive.
yeah,
Wherever she had gone, whatever had happened to her, it's not known, but it is given in great detail how she suffered and how those who witnessed her final hours were so horrified and afraid that some of them couldn't even sleep and wouldn't speak of it, to the point where Maester Benifer, who out of all the maesters to ever serve Targaryens, was so detailed in his account for all that happened in their lives, refused to detail what happened to her.
yeah.
However, Septon Barth does go into detail about her death. Apparently, when she arrived back in King's Landing, her body temperature was so hot that when Lucamore picked her up, he could feel the heat from her body through his armor. And her skin
Hmm.
was so red and oftentimes swelling, and moving as if something was crawling around inside her. Her temperature was so high that eventually her skin started to get darker and crack, and that small amounts of smoke started coming out of her. Eventually, when they lowered her into a tub filled with ice water, the creatures inside of her burst out and started to scream and die, and some as big as Septim Barth's arm. Now,
Mm.
the general consensus here, according to I think it was Maester Benioff or Barth, is that Aerea was not able to tame Balerion and direct him to go where she wanted to, but instead he kind of just did whatever he wanted to and flew to Old Valyria because he
Mm.
was one of the very few dragons that I forgot the guy's name, the exile, the Targaryen exile guy who chose to leave, took with him. So
Yeah.
Balerion is one of the very few, I think the only dragon from Old Valyria, and it's likely he went back there with her.
Yeah. I mean, I forget if Vagar is as well, but whatever the case. But yes, that dragon might be from Old Valyria. Yeah. I mean, they
So,
lived on Dragonstone for 100 years before, but I don't think I think he was even older. Yeah. Then I have to look up Valerian's age if he was hatched on Dragonstone or if he was from Old Valyria. Um, the but nonetheless, yeah, this idea is that they went to Old Valyria and that she got some sort of infection, some sort of parasite.
so she wasn't able to tame him. You're supposed to have you're supposed to somewhat subdue them, and most of his writers were able to tame and master him. But I find it weird that Balerion, despite being content on Dragonstone before all of this, chose to take her there of all places. Like, why would he want to go there? Maybe the
Yeah.
dragons need a constant source of a Valyrian writer on top of them, and if the person of Valyrian blood is not strong enough, they somehow get just get like a free will to go
Yeah.
wherever. It's kind of weird and a little confusing.
So you are right. Balerion is the only one that was born in Valyria. They left with 5 dragons. 4 dragons died, and then uh, 2 more hatched. So there was 3. So
Hmm.
but yeah. So yeah, maybe he was flying home. But the question is like what actually happened? So I have like the science definition is that like okay, all of that talk of worms inside her is bullshit. That she arrived and she had radiation poisoning, and that Valeria was filled with like massive radiation, and she just came back like, which is why they're like, oh, she has a fever, she has all this blackening of her skin. Maybe she has some sort of like radiation poisoning from going to old Valyria, and the worm stuff is bullshit. Maybe there's some sort of parasite there that got in her body.
Yeah, fireworms.
Um, yeah, these fireworms.
Hmm.
Or maybe she didn't go to Old Valyria, but went to Sotheros and got some sort of parasite as well.
That's what I was also thinking too. I got a lot of vibes from the movie Alien. I don't know if George is a
Yeah,
fan of Alien, but that's what it really
I
sounded
think he
like.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But no, this was incredibly creepy. I love stuff like this, and this for me, this is one of the highlights of the chapter. Like, what the hell happened to her? And they set up the mystery so nicely too. Like, where is she? Like, out of all places, she's not in Essos, as far as they could tell. She's not in Westeros. Where else could she have gone? The Summer Islands? There's no way. There has to be somewhere she would have gone, and Old Valyria. Apparently, that's where she could have been. Now, do you think that maybe there were some people still in there in Old Valyria, and they might have found her and taken her to perform some experiments on her? Because how the hell would
Mm.
fireworms get inside her? If it was fireworms.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the idea of like if you're going with the idea that Ice and Fire is actually full sci-fi and that like there was some advanced civilization and there was a nuclear holocaust and everybody went underground, and that it might be that she went there and went underground and found like a super advanced you know technology filled with tanks filled with you know genetically engineered creatures and whatever, from this like super science futuristic society underground. She might have found anything down there. Maybe she went in and just like an alien, she didn't know what she was looking at, and there was some egg, and she looked in front, in the egg, and I don't know, this it got infected with something. I don't know.
Well,
Um,
Valyrians were also like a super advanced civilization, and maybe, and don't they, didn't they practice fire magic at least?
right, but then what is fire magic? I mean, or is it technology? So
Hmm.
I don't know.
So
Like,
it's also possible that
yeah.
they could have been, a lot of experiments that went
Hmm.
awry, and she just happened upon one of them.
Right. Whether it be a magical or pseudo magical or technological, like tank or something, of a genetically engineered dragon monster that she thought she could somehow use, but it actually just went inside her and she didn't know what to do. That very well could have happened.
But why would Balerion bring her back to the Red Keep of all places? And why did, and if he was so content on Dragonstone, like, because yeah, obviously he wasn't making a fuss or anything. Why did he all of a sudden want to fly to Old Valyria the moment she got on top of him?
I
Why?
mean, it may be that she actually did bond with the dragon, and that she was controlling the dragon. I mean, I understand that the maesters are claiming like, oh, she didn't know it flew off. The dragon has a mind of its own. Well, maybe she bonded with it after all, and it was going where she wanted to go.
Hmm,
Maybe she wanted to go to Old Valyria, and she wanted to go home. But once she got infected, and she was panicking.
that does make
You
sense as
know,
well because they do come back
yeah.
eventually. So but regardless, after Jaehaerys learns of where she might have been, he issues a decree that no ship that has passed through Valyria or the Smoking Sea be allowed to dock in Westeros, or any citizen be allowed to sail there by penalty of death. Which is weird because Tyrion Lannister goes there. So is that decree
Hmm.
no longer in place when he goes?
Well,
Hundreds of
that's a
years
good.
later?
That's a good point. Because does Garion go before um, he does he leave before the fall of Ares?
No, I think he leaves after the fall of Ares. So, but would
Right.
Robert
So
rescind that?
yeah, he leaves in 91. I mean, maybe Robert didn't care, or why not at that point,
Do you think
or
Robert Baratheon is like Trump and is just trying to like remove all the stuff that came before just out of spite?
No. I think that maybe no one told, Robert. They just kind of hopped on a ship and went off.
That's
Do you
also
have to tell the
possible.
do you have to tell the king? But and you know, figuring that he wouldn't care. I mean, if you want to go off to Valyria, why not? I don't know.
Yeah. But after the birth of his sons Aemon and Balon, Jaehaerys
Hmm.
looks to Braavos and sends his new hand the king, Septon Barth, to negotiate with the Sea Lord. He still wants those dragon eggs, and they might be in Braavos. And he wants the Sea Lord to give them up or be destroyed. Now, here's where we see Braavos' real power come in. Because the Sea Lord admits that, they could never match Westeros and the dragons in raw strength, but they could in other ways, such as the Faceless Men. And they make like these
Hmm.
veiled threats, which I really like. And he makes the point that the dragon eggs, by this point, are probably just three small stones, to which he would gladly reimburse Jaehaerys for by forgiving the debt that the crown owed to the Iron Bank, which allowed the money to be diverted from paying the Iron Bank to improving the city of the King's Landing, which is what Jaehaerys really wanted to do. Westeros has its own, like, you said it earlier, nuclear weapons with the dragons, but it almost feels like the Faceless Men are Braavos' nuclear weapons in a way.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you destroy Bravos, we'll destroy you.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, Bravos is always supposed to be anti-dragon, right?
Hmm. I do love Jaehaerys over here trying to keep that, prevent another Valyrian dragon lord from rising. That's
Yeah.
really on the top of his agenda. There cannot be another dragon lord out there.
Yeah, because that'll just that he has absolute power. The only thing that can There's only two things that can threaten his power: Aerea returning, which, well, once she dies, I guess it doesn't matter. And then the dragon eggs if they hatch. Those are the only things that you know threaten his power in any way.
And the chapter closes out with Alysanne making the royal progression to the north alone, while Jaehaerys stays behind in King's Landing to help foster peace between Tyrosh and Pentos. And while in the north, she visits White Harbor, Winterfell, and the Wall, and while there, she helps them with funds to build a new castle along the Wall, and even helps grant them the new gift. And has the king outlaw the First Knight's tradition, which is, I think, the second of Alysanne's laws. I think there are only two. I think there are only two.
Yeah.
There might be others,
The
but we haven't
I mean,
even.
she does weird things like she gets rid of the night fort and stuff like that. But we
Because
talk
it's
about like
supposedly too
major
big to
laws.
man.
Yeah, yeah, supposedly. But yeah, for laws, that's pretty much it. Yeah. I mean, she creates Queen's Gate. She gives them the new gift. She gets rid of the night fort. She gets rid of the Lord's right to the first night. Um,
And also in this little part here is where we see the wall's magic and how the dragons might tie into that. Her dragon will not go over the wall beyond the wall into the northern parts of Westeros. For some reason, it just would not cross it. And we discussed this briefly before, but
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the idea that the wall is perhaps a psychic barrier that she has a psychic link with her dragon, so it doesn't want to cross that barrier because there's some sort of technological barrier that prevents magical barrier, sci-fi barrier that prevents this telepathic messages from crossing. There's a couple things that make me think that. One is that when Jojen Reed crosses from one side of the wall to the other, becomes a completely different person, and his green dreams stop. And I think Bran's also change. He also doesn't have any green dreams once he crosses the other side of the wall. Um, and then there's the incident with Orell's eagle that I thought is very suspicious. Is that somehow during the battle at the wall, Orell's eagle explodes into fire, and we don't really have an explanation on why.
isn't it
Um,
like Melisandre's doing that it explodes?
the assumption from John is that it was Melisandre's doing, and but Melisandre never thinks about it or takes credit for it. Um, it's just kind of this weird thing, and so my theory is that perhaps the eagle crossed over the wall and exploded into flames. Um, because it just doesn't seem to be like once we get the Melisandre chapter, we find out that she's mostly a charlatan. And so, had she the power to cause an eagle in the sky to combust, you'd think she wouldn't be so insecure about her magic,
Mm-hmm.
because she talks about how she can't really make flames dance. She has powders in her cloak that makes the flames dance. So she can't really control fire. So how on earth is she causing a bird to explode in the sky? Like all of this contradicts. So I would say that Melisandre didn't cause the eagle to explode, and that something else caused the eagle to explode. And the only explanation that I can think of is that it tried to cross the wall. But I don't know. Maybe there's something else. Maybe, but we'll figure out.
Mm-hmm.
No.
And the other thing is that when Queen Alysanne, when she goes into the Night Fort, she just feels something ominous and off about the whole place, and she wanted to leave. That
Hmm.
could be the lingering magic, maybe, of the Night King, who made that
Hmm.
his castle.
Yeah. 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 Or whatever's going on there. Child sacrifice. All of that. But yeah, there's something. There was something. I mean, Bran felt that the night fort was very creepy as well. But I don't know. Maybe she smelled something. Maybe she smelled the others. She could sense them. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was odd though. Or maybe her dragon sensed something, and then she sensed it through her dragon because she has a telepathic link with the dragon. I don't know.
But ultimately, the chapter closes out. It kind of reminds me of the ending of Return of the Jedi, where everybody's just happy and dancing and embracing, like, everything's cool now.
Do da,
Like,
oop, bop, doo, doo,
did it feel like
do,
that for
do, do,
you? Like,
do, do,
everybody's
do, do,
there.
do,
Like,
do, do, do.
Rayella's there. Rogar brings his, like, everybody's there. Like, hey, high five. Like, everybody's embracing and warmth. It just felt really weird and off. You didn't get that?
I didn't. I didn't think of that, but yeah, I guess. I guess everybody arrives and it's nice.
It's nice, like embrace. It's just go back and read. It's really kind of it just randomly ends like that. But
Yeah, I mean, it's a little weird to be that happy after the death of Aerea. And I mean, I don't know how many years have passed, because so many pages, so many years, like between that ending and some of the tragedy.
one thing I will say that was also kind of weird was in this chapter, winter happens for like a year. It doesn't even feel
Yeah.
like it. They don't just whatever. 1 year winter. That's it.
Hmm. Yeah.
But besides that, other couple of things happen that are of note. Jaehaerys and his small council decide to enact laws for the realm that all of them must follow, which makes sense. Each of the
Hmm.
kingdoms had their own little traditions and laws that, if you go from the Vale to the Riverlands, it might be different laws of things you can and cannot do. Um,
Right. And this is
so,
this is about him establishing the laws and slowly taking power away from the faith. Yeah.
mhm.
And all the little fiefdoms. Yeah.
And after Aerea's death, Rhaena she comes back to King's Landing. Jaehaerys tries to offer her a seat on the small council, and even a new marriage. To where she just says nah. He gives her one of the towers in Harrenhal, where she lives with her dragon until her death at age 50. Jaehaerys would theorize that Rhaena truly died the day her husband did. Earlier, you said how you felt as though she might have been trying to gather allies. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't really think Rhaena never ever really wanted to rule through blood the way Maegor did by force.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it may be that she eventually just decided that she couldn't she couldn't do it. She lost, so she's just gonna go and live in Harrenhal. And it's funny that he links it to the husband as if she cared about her husband that much. I mean, she, they keep trying to say that she was into Aegon the Unworthy, but she was clearly a lesbian and
Oh
had these
yeah, full
lovers.
full blown
So
lesbian.
like, yeah, it's just kind of funny. But that after all these years, she's not pining for her husband. She's sad about her daughter's death, and that her lovers uh, broke up and stole dragon eggs and decided to sail to around the world the other way. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about the.
Well, no, I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay, okay,
hmm
okay.
So we get a small taste between division between Alysanne and Jaehaerys when he starts to treat Aemon as his heir instead of Daenerys, who is his first child, and it would eventually blow up later into what is known as the Second Quarrel.
Hmm.
Alysanne not liking how Jaehaerys really just, despite being, the first child, he'll do this later on with another child as well, which we'll get to. Another thing that I didn't mention with the Aerea and Balerion coming back was something on Valyria was so strong and quick enough that it left a 9 foot large wound on Balerion, one of the biggest dragons ever.
Yeah.
I think it was Septon Barth who noted that. Like something out there was able to wound Balerion, and it is in Valyria right now, whatever it was. And just the thought of that is friggin' insane.
Yeah.
Another thing is, in the north, Alaric Stark, his brother was killed trying to put down a rebellion within the Night's Watch from the men that Jaehaerys had sent there following Maegor's death. And Alaric Stark is not too happy with Jaehaerys, so there's a bit of, animosity
Right. So
there.
this is kind of funny because it's like all of these are the religious ones, right? That got sent to the
Mm-hmm.
wall.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's funny that in Fire and Blood we get a wrap up of that plot when like this is a plot that's specifically dropped in Ice and Fire. Or maybe it's gonna come up in the Winds of Winter, I don't know. But the religious zealots like that got sent to the wall in A Clash of Kings like have been forgotten about.
For those of you who didn't, we have a discussion about that on the there's a Game of Thrones podcast channel where I upload clips on there, and we discussed it briefly in like a small clip where you were saying how these guys that are end world believers,
Yeah.
all got sent to the wall and nothing ever came. That was in Clash of Kings, right?
Yeah, and
Nothing
then
ever came of it.
nothing ever came of it, and so I think it's really funny that the exact same thing that had in Fire and Blood had these people been sent to the wall and we never heard of them again, we'd forget about it. We wouldn't care.
Mm-hmm.
But it's weird that George R. R. Martin says no. Then they started causing trouble, and you're like, oh. Well, why didn't that happen in Ice and Fire when when the religious zealots were sent to the wall? The exact same thing happened, and then George R. R. Martin had a dropped plot. I mean, there's another book coming, so maybe they're going to show up. But
Well, to
I
be
don't know.
fair, they could. It'd be kind of silly if like Clash of Kings to Winds of Winter, they finally arrive in the Winds
No,
of
I mean
Winter and come into
they could be hanging out at Eastwatch, or some
or
people they're
Shadow
just in the
Tower.
background. Yeah, or we just never know what happened to them. I mean, that's a possibility.
Right, but
Um,
don't you think they could pop up again, especially considering, they're men, they're religious zealots. They could come into clash with Salice's Queen's men.
sure, or maybe join Melisandre or something.
Mm-hmm.
Anything could happen. But it's especially if like they got sent to Eastwatch and then they get sent on a mission to rescue wildlings and they see a bunch of undead people. You're an end worlder and then you actually see like zombies. Yeah, they might become even more hardened that the end of the world is coming. Um, who knows? Who knows? It's just spectacularly weird that at least no reference was made. If there was at least one line like, "Oh, Cotter Pike is dealing with some weird people that are, some new recruits that aren't easy to manage," and then we would have at least had a hint, but we don't even have any hint of these people. So yeah.
Don't worry, bro. They're coming. I firmly believe they're on a ship with Alardine, and they're on their way there.
Al Hardim, and the religious zealots. Yes.
But the other little story that we got throughout the entire chapter, randomly, just thrown in there randomly, was Elissa Farman. She finally had a ship built, but she's giving a warning by the Sea Lord of Bravos that there are rewards being offered for her location. But she, sets sail and she goes to Old Town under a new alias. And here is where we learn a bit about the world and what's believed. Of course, just like in the olden days in our world, people believe that the Earth is flat, but the Maesters and many educated people across the known world know it's a sphere, but nobody can really decide on how big it is.
Yeah.
We also see another problem similar, to people have in real life in our world, in the story, a good trade route for spices from ET. The person that could find a faster route to ET for their spices would likely be the richest person in history. And we kind of
Mhm.
see that later on in the story when I'm probably going to butcher his name, Caleris Valerion, when he goes on his
Oh
voyage
yeah,
on the
yeah.
sea snake and he brings back a bunch of stuff and he makes, House Valerion super rich. But Elisa's dream is not about proving that the world is round, but about finding a brand new place across the sea, a new Westeros, a new Essos. She firmly believes that the world is so goddamn large that there are new continents out there,
Yeah.
and she kind of I kind of get it. That's insanely fascinating, but also scary at the same time that there's a brand new world out there with
Mm.
new things. It kind of
Yeah.
gives you off like that vibe about explorers, like Viking explorers trying to find like Vinland.
Right, right. I mean, obviously, this parallels our own world and the discovery of America, but what's odd is that it mirrors season 8 so much,
What do you mean?
that she just wants. Well, Arya just wants to find out what's west of Westeros, and Alyssa Farman is doing this, like, this mission as well. So it's interesting that all of a sudden this is added. Quite a bit of time is added for seemingly no reason. Like, is it important to the plot that the world is round and that you can reach a shy by going west? Like, why is this such a huge thing?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, is that the implication at the end of a Game of Thrones season 8 that Arya is going to end up in a shy?
Or dead because I won't get into it because that's the next chapter, like right at the beginning of the next chapter. But some of the Hightower boys currently living there, they sail with her on their own ships, and it just does not go well. Once again, that'll be the next chapter. But we also
Yeah.
get an interesting tale of the Winter King, known as Brandon the Shipwright, who had the same dream she did, kinda. He built a fleet of
Mm,
ships, sailed west, but never returned. The difference here would be that she's sailing west, but in a warmer, towards the south, warmer
yeah.
waters, whereas Brandon sailed in the much colder ones up north. But like I said, eventually the High Towers caught wind of this and decided to join her. And eventually, news of Elissa trying to go off, reach Jaehaerys, who saw through her fake identity, but could not catch her in time because there's no islands out there. But she
Mm.
does find a couple of islands. Once again, next chapter. I really got into the story so much that I actually caught a glimpse of the next chapter. I'm like, oh, we get more? Let's find out what's going on here. And I really liked it. But we'll talk about that next chapter. But
All right.
Jaehaerys and Alysanne, triumphs and tragedies. What did you think?
I thought it was okay. I felt like it was like four different chapters. I
Yes.
felt like there wasn't any sort of unifying theme. It was odd that we got so much about these random characters, and like the search for the dragon eggs and the cruise around the world and stuff like that. Like you'd think that they would have been these things that were very tangential to the Targaryen family. Um, so I thought that was interesting. But it seems like George was just writing, like I'm gonna write this, and then got away from him.
You can
Um,
definitely tell, like, he wants to write, but then he gets bored about writing just about the Targaryens all the time, and he wants to write this
yeah,
other short story. But you know he can't release like a
right.
random separate book because it's just a short little story. So he's got to put it in there somehow and make it fit. And I'm cool with it.
I think that's exactly it. That at the end of the day, like the Targaryens start getting boring when it's just them. Like how many incestuous dragon riding, like silver haired people, like trying to betray each other and dealing with the faith of the seven. Like, can you deal with and trying to consolidate power? How long can you write about that?
A
So
Song of
yeah,
Ice and Fire, in a sense, is kind of like Star Wars. Like it's a big galaxy. You can write stories in many places, many planets. Same with Game of Thrones.
right.
It's a big
And
world.
yet it seems like the only thing that gets written is a planet destroying weapon that can be destroyed all at once. You know?
We don't talk about that. Uh, but no, like Game of Thrones, there are many short stories everywhere that you could write, and clearly George wants to write more short stories in this world that he created, and I'm
Yeah.
glad he did because I really like the whole Elissa Farman thing. It's freaking awesome. Um, like I said, I agree. The chapter was I liked it. I thought it was not as great as some of the past ones, but I thought it was pretty good. These short stories aren't as bad as the random story that came out of nowhere in one of the first Jaehaerys chapters, where Rogar has this plan to have this prostitute seduce Jaehaerys.
Oh
And
yeah, I
remember
remember
that? That was so
that. Yeah.
fucking random out of the blue. Like, what is happening? It's not that bad, but it's still pretty good. The best thing about the chapter to me was the mystery of Aerea, what happened to her. I really like
Mhm.
that. I love those creepy little things.
Yeah, no, and when Fire and Blood first came out, I would say that passage about Area was the most talked about thing in the whole book.
You think so?
Yeah, well, first off, half the book was already released beforehand, so there was nothing surprising. That piece was like, what on earth is this? That's what really, because that really, turns everything upside down. If there's some sort of like in Valyria, there's actually monsters or scientific experiments or something, that is kind of a big
Or
game
lab
changer.
experiments that have
Yeah,
escaped?
yeah, exactly. So
That could
that's a
be
big
what
game
the
changer.
Stonemen are.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I also, I somewhat think that there has to be some sort of like universal link on why do we have these stories of the others and the squishers, and then all the way in the northeast of Essos, these stories about these monsters that try to pass through the five towers. Like, what is the unifying issue that created all of these monsters in the world? And I would say that the unifying thing must be like some sort of genetic engineering and some sort of that there was some sort of warring society with genetic engineers
The
that
Valyrians.
yeah that were dealing with these monsters. So
It was most likely the Valyrians because don't they, isn't it said that they had like advanced technology in their buildings? The
well,
buildings could last longer.
I even think it's pre-Valyrians. I think it's like before, because the Valyrians only start popping up and doing stuff in the last few thousand years. I'm talking like, I think there's stuff that's even before that, like 20,000 years ago, like subterranean society, before the subterranean society, before the long night and stuff like that.
Yo,
So
you in the subterranean society, man. You love the
hey man,
subterraneans.
I didn't put a million subterranean locations in the goddamn story. Okay, George R. R. Martin put a million goddamn subterranean locations in the story. Tunnels everywhere. I didn't do that. He did that. Okay.
And I will say, on the creepy side of the area thing, there's not a lot of creepy like moments and chapters like that, even in the Song of Ice and Fire. I can think of one off the top of my head. Um, the moment, the
I mean,
last
Davos and Melisandre is like Shadow Baby, maybe. Yeah.
That wasn't as creepy as the one I'm thinking of. The last
Yeah.
chapter in Feast for Crows, it's the Sam chapter, and it ends with him kind of like befriending this one guy named Pate, like the pig boy.
Mm,
But
yeah.
but in the prologue, we learn that Pate is dead.
Yeah.
So who the hell is that guy? Is Sam befriending a random faceless men assassin? That was so fucking creepy when this guy just comes out. He gets, oh, I'm Pate, like the pig boy. Like, wait a minute. So
Yeah.
creepy. I loved it. I love stuff like that. It's so great.
Yeah. Yeah. Qyburn's workings are pretty creepy. Stuff like that. Well, so anything else on this chapter?
No, that is it for the chapter. The Jaehaerys ones, my God, they're so fucking long, and it's not that they're boring. It's just, ah, fuck. I kind of want another.
They're just yeah.
I
You
want.
kind of want a new king to come around because you know Jaehaerys is going to rule for a freaking another 20 years. So
I kind of want another king to come around. I kind of want to get to like the other ones that I don't really know too much about, because fuck.
yeah, yeah. It feels like the story has slowed down, you know.
Just a tad.
But
Like you get cool
yeah.
little things every now and then, like the area thing and the Sea Lord and Elissa Farman. So he does keep it interesting. He does really keep it interesting. Actually, I'm kind of glad that we get his royal progressions around Westeros, mostly because we get to see all these ancient like families that we know in the main story back then. Like we get to see the ancient Starks of the day.
And I feel he was like house dropping a lot of houses that you know we start hearing of historically that have been like taken out. Like you hear of House Rain doing stuff in this chapter, and you hear of House Peak doing stuff in this chapter. Houses that were really important and then kind of get extinguished by either the Dance of the Dragons or the Blackfire rebellions, um, and so I think I feel like he was purposely plopping in certain houses for that reason,
Yeah.
just giving them shout outs.
But I will say I'm a little annoyed that Dreamfyre Rhaena, someone who's been very integral to a good chunk of this, her story kind of ends there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Preston, thank you so much for joining me, and guys, thank you for joining us. Are there any closing statements on this chapter, Preston?
No, no. I mean, I guess we're looking forward to the next one. You're saying
The next
there's a lot
one,
of setup.
the next one I really like. It's the aftermath of Elissa Farman's journey, and I really like. I just went through it. That's why it took me a while for us to start recording. I was going through it just a little bit of it because I really was enamored with it. But
Mm.
yep, I'm looking forward to the next one, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back next time with what's this chapter called? This chapter is called uh oh god, no, just fucking Jaehaerys and Alysanne, policy, progeny, and fuck.
Oh, God. I feel like
Policy.
sounds riveting.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.